So we were talking about the monster manual, the Dungeons and Dragons monster manual, monster shopping, pulling in some different monsters to play other than the usual, hey, it's level 1, let's go beat up on some orcs and goblins. And then we kind of explored dinosaurs. This question of dinosaurs in D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. I guess it could be Dungeons and Dinosaurs. We pushed that up to the channel archive here. And now I want to explore this idea with monster effects. So the players get into an encounter with monsters. And the first thing they're thinking of is, where's the treasure? How much treasure are we going to get? Is this worth the payout? And many players, rightly so, and many dungeon masters, you focus on the hit points. Essentially, it's a contest of hit points. The party has a pool of hit points. The monster, the encounters, they have a pool of hit points. And it's whoever breaks first. And I say breaks first because you might be playing with a system of morale where monsters might run. You might have ways to heal. A monster in the script, when it gets down to a certain level, might surrender, right? Or it might run away. Different ideas. But it's this battle of hit points back and forth. And in D&D, you deal with hit points by removing them, doing a lot of damage consistently. It's stats versus stats. I want to pull in some monsters that have effects. And I want to challenge you as a dungeon master, and I want to prepare you as a player to deal with these monsters' effects. Because in the background, the hit points are being tracked, and we're figuring out who's doing what damage. As soon as you throw in effects, that changes things absolutely radically and messes with the players in a good way, in a tactical way. So imagine this scenario. The fighter's just blasting away, doing tons and tons of damage, Gets hit with paralysis, right? And now is, depending on the system of D&D, is paralyzed for D-something turns. They're out of the fight. They're out of the fight. What this means now is they're not dealing that damage, and depending on the monster's intelligence in the scenario, the monster might be beating on this fighter with no way to effectively defend itself. And if it's AD&D, it might be an auto hit. If it's D&D modern, might be flat-footed and no dexterity bonus and just a generic armor bonus. The fighter's in trouble. So now the party has to figure out, well, how do we navigate this? Maybe there's a way to undo the paralysis. But exploring this idea where a fighter gets paralyzed, that radically changes the hit dice equation. So monsters that can deal with paralysis. Now, poison is another effect. I really generally don't like poison because its implementations, for the most part, in earlier D&D are save or die. I mean, I understand, look, it's poison. You get hit, you're going to die from that perspective. But that seems a little bit extreme, in my opinion. I really don't like save versus die because it comes down to a dice roll. You're like, well, Fritz, it's D&D. They're the dice. You go in for the risk. You should know if something's poisoned or be very, very careful. That's not to say I don't use it, but save versus die doesn't really add any weight to the encounter. I bite your rogue with my poisonous snake. You roll a 1. You're like, no problem, I got advantage. You roll a 2 and you die. Okay, you're out, but that has just reduced the hit points that the players will have to adjust. They don't have to make any choices, I guess is what I'm saying. They don't have to make choices. That player character is removed. Now, poison that deals extra damage a turn, I kind of like that. So the poisonous snake bites you. You take 1d6 damage. You're like, all right, I could take that. I could take 1d6. Then you fail your save versus poison or your fortitude or constitution, depending on the edition of D&D, and now you're taking an extra point a turn. I like that because now it adds a little more urgency where you're like, okay, look, I take an extra 1 point of damage a turn, 2 or 3 turns, I'm okay. Combat's on turn 5, and you're like, look, I'm starting to take some serious damage here. Cleric, druid, paladin, healing word, whatever it's going to be, has to make a decision. Do we drop it on you? Do we drop it on someone else? Do we wait? How much longer is the poison going to work? Those throw in those calculations to create that sense of urgency rather than just blocks of hit points smashing into each other. So that type of poison I like. Let's talk about level drain, because level drain, depending on when you get hit with it, at what level, it's either similar to save or die or effects like poison. So at the lower levels, and I understand level drain, this is powerful undead. This is no baby cakes. This is no joke. So I'm not gonna sugarcoat it and make it easy street, right? Level drain, at that point when you start hitting that, you're going into the lower levels of the dungeon. You're facing serious undead that have these powers. You're just not beating on skeletons and zombies and zombie rats and things like that. You're now facing that mid-tier undead that have serious effects on the living members of the party. Constructs in level drain is an interesting thing. Like we were playing Warforged, and they're kind of immune to a lot. But for the most part, level drain is interesting because at the lower levels, it's very much like poison. I get hit, and again, depending on the system, lose 1d4 levels. I could take one hit, and that's it. I take a second hit, I'm dead. Okay, I'm waking up like a day later as now a minion of this undead creature. Where if it's the higher levels, if I'm level 10 to 15, it's kind of like another poison effect. I could take 2 or 3 hits. Not that I want to take 2 or 3 hits. It could still very much kill me. It bypasses that hit point block. Think about a fighter. A level 10 to 15 fighter that has multiple hundreds of hit points. You're like, I could take that dragon fire and take 86 points of damage. The rogue is like, I take 86 points of damage, make some evasion check, I take 0, right? But you could take that damage as a fighter. Level drain, you get hit 2 or 3 times, you have only got 10 or 12 levels or 14 levels. It's going to drain through that fast. So depending on when you get hit with level drain, it could be an instant kill like poison, or it could be an instant kill like poison that affects hit points. I prefer the second. That's usually when I like to have level drain. Let's talk about charms. Charm abilities, dominate abilities, they're fun. I enjoy them the most for the role-playing perspective of the DM, but you kind of got to be careful. Where you get into trouble in D&D and you ruin the experience as a DM is when you railroad your players, when something happens and the players feel like they can no longer make any choices. Something could happen and there's just bad choices, or the players are in a lot of trouble, but at least they can go out swinging and rolling some dice. Something that happens where they have zero choice, that I don't like to do that as a DM, and they feel like, what's the point of playing my character? I don't decide what to do. So in terms of dominate spells, I have to utilize them correctly to build the narrative, not always tactically. Okay, what is an example of that? I dominate your character, I take control, you're now going to do exactly what I want. We're fighting on top of that mountain, I tell you to jump off the mountain. Like, that would tactically be the correct thing to do, right? I mean, look, you had to be in range of the spell, and you were in range of the spell, line of sight. So that was the first choice that maybe you could have navigated. Second, I had to cast the spell. The rest of the party didn't stop it. Well, Fritz, maybe it's a power at will. Okay. Third, you had to fail some sort of saving throw. You failed that. You had multiple chances. Now I dominate you. I tell you to take a hike and jump off the mountain. Well, what's there to be angry about? I'm taking away the agency of that. I'd rather create some chaos. I'd rather create some fun. I'd rather have, if it's a magic user that I'm going to dominate, what if I cast, instead of jumping off the mountain, instead of casting lightning bolt or magic missile and do damage, I just drop web right in the middle of the party. Just blast the party with web and let's see what happens. I might web some of my minions too, but that's a lot of fun. What if we cast a spell like glitter dust, or I blind the fighter, or we throw paralysis? Stuff that's just going to really throw as much chaos as I can into combat. That makes things exciting. So in terms of dominate spells, a little different than charm spells. Dominate spells, that's how I like to utilize them, just to kind of cause that chaos. I did use a dominate spell once. The Vampire Lord was just kind of toying with the party, and it was interesting. I cast dominate on the wizard in the party, and I had the wizard break their wand of lightning bolts, just to kind of taunt and show the power of the Vampire Lord. It was within that dominate spell. There were consequences for that, but looking back, I don't think that was. I would have done that differently, because now they were out of the lightning bolt spell, the wand, and they lost that gold piece equivalency. And it wasn't really a choice that they made. It's not like we're on some boat and it's stormy out and I'm going to use the lightning bolt wand to like propel us across, and it fell out of my hand and I dropped it in the lake and it sunk to the bottom. You made those choices. Me breaking didn't have that choice. I think a better choice to show the power of the Vampire Lord would have been to have the wizard pull out the wand of lightning bolts, hold it right to their face, and blast them in the face with it. I think that would have been more fun. It would have expended a charge. It would have caused some damage. It probably wouldn't have killed them, but it would have gotten the point across. But utilizing these abilities, right? Going back to, yes, the lower levels, we got to beat up on some orcs, and you got to discover they're attacking a caravan, and they're led by a half-elf who is angry at everybody, and it leads to this stronghold in the woods that was an abandoned castle, but now it's being rebuilt. Why is it being rebuilt? I get it. Caves of Chaos, all that stuff, lower levels. But as we move through D&D, the adventures, looking at this idea of, let's pull out some monsters with abilities. Let's pull out some monsters with special effects, creature effects, make them happen. So combat is just not stat blocks, smashing into stat blocks. There is a different feeling and a different type of agency.